So, so yeah, right. Well, listen, we've got a load of people joined in now. We're pushing to 3 numbers. So without further ado, I think let's start. So I think the best place to start is Andrew. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and White Marble?
Thanks, Paul. Welcome, everyone. Really appreciate your time. If you're watching this on demand, this was on a sunny Friday afternoon, so we especially appreciate the folk that have dialed in on a Friday afternoon. We hope to make the most of your 45 minutes with us. I'm Andrew Scott. I'm the MD at White Marble Consulting. My background in the UK, at least, has been banking, insurance, and asset management. And I've been over here for about 20 years, although my accent suggests perhaps I've been over for less time than that. A little bit about White Marble Consulting. The short form version is that we're a marketing consultancy for the wealth and asset managers. We work with firms both here in the UK and into Europe and across in the US. And there's kind of 3 things that we focus on. Helping firms to articulate their brand. So whether that's explaining their brand, explaining how sustainability underpins their brand, and explaining how their kind of strategies and products fit into that brand and how those can be articulated to the market. Secondly, we help firms engage with prospects and clients through all of the mechanisms you see on the slide. So we help you think about target audiences and segmenting them, and leading them through the funnel, whether that's digital or events or through content or through social media. And then lastly, we've got this idea of best practice. So we work with firms looking at how well their marketing teams are set up and the technology they're using and the processes they're using. And we also have a specific product, which we might have a comment on at the end, called Beacon, which is all about benchmarking your digital marketing performance. But we can maybe have 30 seconds on that later. So that's me and White Marble.
Super. Well, thanks, Andrew. And the interesting thing is, we started working with White Marble from the year dot, and we can't recommend the work that we've seen White Marble do any highly. And this is not a paid promotion commercial. It's a true fact. And we're very excited that Andrew's on this webinar with us, and we actually come at Profundcom from a very different angle. So what we do is we kind of take all the good work that companies like White Marble do with content, marketing, with strategy, with deployment, segmentation, and all that, and we use our digital platform to help asset managers, PEs, hedge funds, anybody in the investment management space to identify new investment from their digital marketing. And what we also do as part of that is we provide a single view of all their digital marketing. So we can actually, with our platform, you've got the ability to see, how your marketing is trending. How does that compare to investments coming in? You've got the ability to see things like globally, how is your marketing performing? So you've got the ability to do that. This is all, by the way, in real time. So I'm just impressing everybody, right? And then what you can also do as well is you can see, which fund of yours across channels are people finding more interesting. And obviously, it seems like ESG is the way. We can build things in our platform that allows you to see your return on investment over time, over the campaigns you're running, and that is our platform. And we work solely in the fund marketing space, and we've done so for the last 20 years. So that's a little bit about Profundcom. And I suppose, like I mentioned to people who joined earlier, these are the 4, 5, 6 areas. Oh, I can't even count on what we're going to talk about today, because normally we only talk about 4 things, but with Andrew today, we're going to make him work. So, I suppose, the one thing I suppose most marketers like to talk about, whether their background is retail from an Apple, Nike, Samsung point of view, and translating that into what that means for an asset manager, the first thing we're going to look at is brand experience. So Andrew, what is brand experience, in the world of asset management, and how do you tie that all together with your funds, your strategies, and the like?
Well, I think the first thing to say is that it's probably not really possible to do brand any kind of justice in the sort of the several minutes that we're going to allocate to it. And certainly looking across my fellow directors and team, there are people in White Marble far more qualified than me to talk about brand. But what I would say is, and with all of these points that we're looking at, this is a combination of what we have seen that works and what we work with our clients on, but we don't take all the credit. These are observations of looking at firms that are being successful digitally and us simply saying, this is what we see switched on firms doing in our industry. So around brand, I think what I would say, or what I would limit it to, is that we know that the firms who start with purpose are the ones that deliver the best experiences, the ones that get help quite often digging into what their brand purpose is, what the purpose of their investment firm is, and then how they articulate that to the market. Now, whether that's explaining the narrative behind their brand, whether that's explaining how sustainability underpins their brand, and then tying that out into a messaging framework that means that the way that they articulate it on their website, on their collateral, and their social channels is all consistent. And also that it turns out into practical things like that flows into how you write your About Us page in super simple digital terms, or it helps how you, or informs how you write your careers page and what it feels like to work at this firm. And it allows you to stitch together the purpose of the firm with how you articulate your products, so that it feels like when customers look at your firm, they understand that this is why you exist, this is what drives you, this is what your passions are as a firm, and here are the products that you sell that deliver on that. And these are all very simple things to say, and they're harder to put into practice. But I just wanted to focus, I suppose, on the practical things. So consistency of message, consistency of tone of voice, and then consistency of experience. I mean, my version of brand experience is that every time you encounter this firm, that you have a consistent experience, and whether that's whether you're phoning up, client services, that's whether you're seeing a tweet or a LinkedIn post, whether you're getting your reporting posted to you or emailed to you or sent to you, and whenever you interact with the website, that those experiences are consistent. So that's how I would summarize how good firms put brand experience together.
Do you find it's different based on AUM as well? So would a boutique manager have a different view on branding versus somebody who's at $1 billion versus somebody who's at 100 billion?
I think only in the practical implementation of it. It's just easier at that smaller scale to be able to gather some people around a table and dig into why we exist as a firm and why we are differentiated to anyone else who's doing something similar to us. Clearly with a large firm, there's just a lot more stakeholders and it's a bigger ship to shift, and a lot of the traditional views are perhaps a lot more entrenched and need to be dug into, and people moved along a journey, and that takes time, and it's harder.
Right.
It's really a scale question. I don't think the approach or what needs to be done or how you do it changes. It's
right.
Just a scale.
And just controversially, Andrew, what did you think of the Aberdeen rebrand?
Well, a few things actually, but thanks for bringing it up. So I think that with any rebrand, there's always a lot of fuss, and then things typically quieten down. And so I think in many ways, if you do those sorts of changes, you just have to ride out the storm, right? You just have to go. There's a whole lot of people who are going to like what you've done. There's a whole lot of people who aren't going to like what you've done. You just got to stick with it. And actually the market then quietens down and realizes that there was a purpose to it, even if you still don't like it, but that's fine. And it does get embedded, and people now kind of are quite comfortable with Aberdeen as a brand. I think it was a very purposeful thing to do. I think when you see mergers and people trying to run dual brands and dual roles and all of that. I think that's really, really hard. And I think sometimes you've got to quite aggressively make a big change that really takes people out of both brands and says, that's all past, there's a new brand now. And so I think the mechanism of doing that is pretty valid. It might be a bit of a blunt instrument, but I think it's necessary.
And where do you stand with, I suppose, mid-sized managers who've got a mixed brand? Is it worth a rebranding exercise, or is it worth actually saying, well, we've got a bit of a mixed bag here, say fact sheets versus email signatures versus, all the other digital output and printed output we're putting together? What, in your mind, is the best approach? Where have you seen success?
I guess it depends on what you mean by brand, though, because I think that, historically, and I feel like this is wading into grounds that aren't my expertise, but what I would say is I suppose we always interpret it as the visual interface, whereas I'm much more interested in the narrative that explains what's behind the brand. The rest of it is quite mechanical in my point of view. I think that typically when we do those projects, there's a whole lot of hard work up front that sets out the brand narrative, what you want to be known for, how you want to describe your products, all of that kind of stuff. And then there's a very mechanical rollout that says, well, actually, there's two things. There's making sure that your internal stakeholders are all on the same journey, because there's no point going out to the market unless actually everyone internally thinks the same way. And then from my point of view, it's just a very mechanical rollout of making sure that all of the touch points, are consistent. So,
essentially, the message there is whatever you choose as your brand, be consistent in whatever you're putting out.
Well, certainly, but I think also there's a transparency element to this. And if you take Russian sanctions, that's a great example of you need to be very, very sure that what you say in your brand narrative is in fact what you are then delivering in practical terms, because and you know that there's...
And that's the same with greenwashing, right? And
obviously, you've got a world of people now who are going to look at your products and your content in fine detail and decide whether you're staying true to what you said in your sort of explanation of your brand.
Super. Well, that's brand, guys. Oh, we've got a question come in. Let me see. Trouble. Here we go. We've got a question coming in. Okay, that was you, Andrew. We will move on. Data driven.
I'm just worried about the fact that
we are transparent. We are transparent.
Yeah, that's right.
Nothing else, guys. So data driven. So marketing being data driven, and people succeeded at that. Where have you seen success across the? We've definitely seen a lot of success and failures in this.
So the thing is that everyone loves talking about data at the moment, but I'm not telling anybody on the call anything new when I say, but data's hard, and it's very easy to make grandiose statements about how you want to measure things, and it's actually really hard putting into practice. But what I would say that we have seen as the measures of success are having a framework that joins up in very clear terms your business objectives. So go and look at your board papers and your strategy papers and say, this is what the business is trying to achieve. Maybe it's diversifying, growing AUM, geographic reach, all of those sorts of things. That needs to be mapped into, therefore, what is marketing going to do to achieve that? And then if we're taking a digital focus, then actually what are the digital activities that you're going to undertake? And then that just means that you have, and this is simplistic stuff, but a lot of us don't get around to getting all this in place, but it's that framework that says, I understand that I'm doing these digital activities and they map up to these marketing activities overall. Maybe those are very much the one and the same thing now, right? We've kind of made that progress, but this is what is contributing to the overall organization's objectives, and that puts marketing in a much stronger position to be seen as a contributor to those objectives rather than a sort of a support act that helps with things. And then breaking down those digital activities into the actual activities you're going to do, the KPIs, and then the actual source of that data. So right down to the exact data sources that you're going to set up to do that. I think the other thing I would say is, I think as an industry, we're still pretty terrible at measuring campaigns. And there's another conversation about campaigns versus always on, but I still think it's not common enough that for every campaign we do, there really are quantifiable digital marketing outcomes that are thought about up front, the mechanisms put in place, measured throughout the campaign, not the classic, we did a review of the project or the campaign a month later and found out that it didn't work very well.
Yeah, and I think, what I find is that you're right, there is a discipline element to putting campaigns together, and what I found in the kind of 290 people we work with, what is that most of the marketing team are so busy generating the content for campaigns. They're so busy, they just want to get it sent out, and they'll look at the campaign data once, and then they're and just like light at the end of the tunnel is somebody with a torch giving them more work to do. That's exactly what starts to happen. So the marketing teams, because they're seen as a support function as opposed to a core business function, end up just not having time to put those analytics together. And I suppose that's a pitch for what we do, is that we not only kind of bring that together, so you did those reports together, so you don't have to go looking for it. We where we've found customers have incredible success is not just running a campaign, but automating the campaign. So based on particular digital activities, different messages would get fired out, whether it's in an email, whether it's an invite, or something like that. And I think the other challenge that marketers find, the marketers I think that do really well, is, as harsh as it to say, is that most marketers are using the creative part of their brains to create the campaigns. But the other side of the brain, and I don't know which part it is, that does the analytical part, is almost not taught in Marketing 101. I know your courses do it, but most marketing courses will just look at some basic analytics, but don't actually give you the ability to drill down into your own data. And what I really like about the Beacon product is what Beacon allows you to do as well. So in adjunct to what we do at Profundcom, you can take your data and analyze it against your peer group to see, well, not only how are we performing internally, because you can only do that campaign to campaign. You've got the ability to look outwards to see, okay, we're bad, but we're not that bad, right? So I think there is a discussion to be had around that. And again, I know you wanted to talk about measuring and comparing. That ties into that, doesn't it, Andrew?
Sure. And look, at the risk of going on and on about Beacon, we think set your objectives, measure your progress through the campaign, and then yes, we think it's valuable to compare yourself to firms that look like you. And there's a debate, there's an argument to say you want to compare yourself with outside of industry as well, and we think that's a valid challenge. But step one is find firms that look like you, which is what we try to do with the Beacon product, and then that allows you to see whether your performance is above or below what the benchmark is, and therefore channel your efforts to where you're below, clearly. But I think there's a fair challenge to say comparing yourself purely to what we're achieving in asset and wealth management. The challenge there is, but if other industries are doing so much better, and that's the expectation, then I think we need to start overlaying, that level as well. I mean, there's a point there about what they're doing yields results versus snazzy. I think if you are genuinely setting objectives and sharing those and sharing the outputs with stakeholders within the firm, you also have to just accept that the numbers are small. If you do a campaign and you're wanting to drive people to a page so that they subscribe to something or they download something, we're not in the thousands and hundreds of thousands of sort of results industry. So I think there's a need to kind of get people's expectations that you might get a handful of people that do that, and that's okay, because as we all know, it only takes a handful of qualified prospects to participate in a campaign and click through to whatever it is you're wanting them to do, for that to be potentially quite successful.
And that's what brings on to my pet peeve in the world, which is AI and machine learning. And I come from a background of AI and machine learning. So did my dad, and my son is doing machine learning and AI right now for EDF Energy. So they know what to charge you when, based on your usage. And the thing is, and you've nailed it, Andrew, is there's not enough data available transactionally or behaviorally in the space we work in asset management to make any meaningful, machine learning and AI projections. You can do the journey orchestration part of it, which is absolutely fine based on behaviors, but there's just not enough data to do that. So whenever I kind of go into an asset manager and they're saying, oh, we've just hired a bunch of data scientists, and I'm like, well, you can do the whole stuff in Power BI if you want to. And, so that's just, that is just something to be wary of, or whoever, the people who are attending this, is that, don't get caught up in, the hype. It's just kind of getting these basics on your campaign right. We've got a couple of questions here.
Yeah.
Before we go on to the next one. Do you both use agile project management? We absolutely, at Profundcom, do not use agile project management. We use Kanban. And you can Google Kanban. It's kind of agile, but it's very different. It's a Japanese way of putting on a board all the parts of the project you need to work on, and then people picking them off and completing them. So, the reason that what sits behind Kanban is the fact that you're only as fast as your slowest component. So that's our answer. I don't know, what do you use, Andrew?
Well, no, but I was going to tackle it in a slightly different way, because I was going to talk about that when we get to sort of the empowered bit around
okay,
teams.
well, let's do that then. Is that okay? Is that okay?
And the other question, about Beacon, happy to, rather than go through that now, happy to share that with participants afterwards in terms of what data does Beacon use to create the peer group. So happy to share some info about that after the webinar, if that's helpful.
I've got one more question from Frederick. I've noticed marketers being reluctant to assess whether what they do actually yields results versus looking snazzy.
So that was really my point about managing expectations about genuine results of campaigns, and I totally understand, like, you want to show great results of thousands of people hitting whatever it was that you built. But I think in terms of getting real results, you need to manage expectations about what will really click through. So that was what I referred to earlier.
Right. Okay, got it. Well, now we're on to my favorite bit, Andrew, and I really did like this topic. Write like a writer. Yeah,
and I think that I may have misled you slightly on the title there, Paul.
Oh.
I don't think I'm going to tell you exactly how to write, because I think people would question whether I've got that skill myself. But I guess what I wanted to focus on here was, asset managers in particular, we all produce reams and reams of content. So what is it that firms do to get sort of cut through with their content? Well, I think there's a few things, and maybe these are topics that lots of people know, but I think the first thing is having a content plan. And I know that sounds very, very obvious, but we don't see it all that often, of having a potentially up to a 12-month content plan that thinks about the themes, that thinks about the events coming up over the year that you want to plan around, that thinks about the themes that you want to focus on, that ties into sort of campaigns and product launches and all that sort of stuff. So having a content plan as step one. I think that it's important that it's agnostic of the medium that you're going to use. So I'm doing another webinar next week talking about video. And one of the points that I was going to make there was, the worst way to think about video is for someone to say, do you know what, we should make a video, because that's not the way to do it. The way to do it is to say, we've got an audience, we've got some stuff we want to tell that audience. Let's think about where that audience is and what the best, mediums to communicate with that. And that might be through white papers, it might be through emails, could be through social, could be through video. So the content plan should be led by what you want to say to which audiences about your things, and then start to break it down into the actual mediums that you'll use. Yeah. And I think the second thing is...
Sorry, Andrew. What I was just going to say, I mean, how many times have you seen a manager just follow that and say, yeah, let's make a video, and they do a video, and it's tumbleweed for the next 8 months, right?
Well, and a lot of that's to do also with what the promotion plan for the video was. So, making a video and putting it on your website generally achieves very little. Making a video and having a promotion plan that says we're going to promote it through email and social, we're going to do some little short clips as teasers and all those sorts of things. But of course, what all of this does across content, data, technology, and all these things, it takes a lot of resource. And I think that you only have to look around the number of jobs being advertised at the moment to see that I think, marketing's time in the sun over the last couple of years has definitely sort of been coming. And you just see it's our time as marketers, I think, to attract the resource and the investment that we need to do all this stuff, because it does take time. Social's the great example where it's effectively free, the channels in many ways, but it's expensive in terms of the time that it needs to sort of have allocated to it.
I've just got a question come through this is running on YouTube, by the way, as well. So somebody's actually put a comment on YouTube, and they're asking, what is the best deployment for video? Vimeo, YouTube, there's an irony in that, or Bright Talk, or Asset TV?
Well, I would say, as you'd expect, it depends, because those are all very different platforms. So Bright Talk and Asset TV are primarily going to buy you audience. So that's all about sharing the video on those platforms to their audiences, and that gets you straight into an audience. YouTube is great for unrestricted sharing of content, but that doesn't always work for asset managers or wealth managers who need to think about who their end audience might be. But it's a great place for talking about your brand and your sustainability programs and sponsorship and all those sorts of things, or your teams and your people. And then what was the other one? Vimeo. I'm neutral as to whether you use Vimeo or 23 or a platform that you own. But I am a big believer in making sure you own your content. So put it out on all the socials and other platforms that you like, but make sure that you don't put it all there and not on an owned platform would be my recommendation.
And I've definitely seen that, Andrew, is a lot of people whose content ties back to their website. So whether it's the video on the website or articles on the website or LinkedIn or social posts, pointing people back to the website. The great thing is, once people are on your website, you're pulling in the analytics, as opposed to something that's in the ether that you've got a sense of, and you can't really, define, the success or the ROI of those campaigns.
Yeah, and look, and it is a balancing act, because I'm also a believer in going to where people are, and if people want to be on a platform and understand you and invest in your products, then you need to be over there. But I just, in that context, I just mean make sure also that you do have, for argument's sake, a copy of that you do own, so that when other platforms change their minds and change their models, you've still got. I wouldn't build up my entire video presence on YouTube and then find that something changes and you don't have control of that. the other just part to content I was going to say was to think like a publisher. And I think the successful firms that we've seen that have, in many cases, brought in folk from journalism, from publishing, it's that change in thinking because they are driven by wanting to resonate with their audience. So they are the ones who are thinking week by week, month by month, what are the products, what are the topics we want to get out there, how do we, what are we going to publish this week that's going to resonate with the audience, rather than that inward view of, well, we've written a piece on this investment strategy and we're just going to publish it because it's available.
Because we can. Yeah,
because we've got lots of them. Yeah.
Yes. Super. Okay, well, we've got 15 minutes to go, I think. So let's back on. Understanding tech. Does anybody understand tech?
Right. So I think this is where marketers need to make sure they understand the technology that they're using. I think, and I know that this is a joint ownership between marketing and technology teams, and I think they need to become closer than ever, and we see that happening a lot. But I think marketers have a real responsibility to understand the technologies available to them, to be able to kind of articulate those in a marketing technology stack. And we think about those, visual diagrams of how your technology works from a customer flow. So thinking about prospects coming in one end, going through engagement and conversion and retention, but also how the data is mapped. So how are you collecting data at that point? Where's it going to be held? How will you make sure that you inform later in the journey with that data? And then just, I would say, owning the performance of that stack. And I know, again, that that's something you probably have to share with technology, but we've seen examples where different parts of the organization own different parts of that technology stack. And if that's not joined up, I think it's very hard to own the overall performance of your technology. And I wanted to talk just really briefly on, slightly randomly, I know, but on Headless content management systems, because there's definitely an in vogue view of moving to headless at the moment, and I think that's fine. My two observations for what they're worth are, I don't think you should do headless just for the sake of it. I think where you are needing really high performant website solutions and you want to decouple so that your front end's super fast and you can manage your back end safely and securely, fine. That's a good use case for headless. But I think secondly, it gives you a good opportunity to start to build a really forward-looking technology stack by thinking about building this kind of central content data repository and publishing hub that you look after here, and then clearly it delivers content to the website through Headless. It might deliver it to apps, it might deliver it to your sales teams. So that model that people have talked about a lot, I think that's the opportunity, and that's where Headless gives you the opportunity to think about building internal sort of publishing hubs with data and information, and then delivering out to the appropriate endpoint for each channel, rather than just saying let's build a headless website, because that's the current
sure.
kind of
and throw in Ethereum blockchain and
that's right,
whatever buzzword you want to throw in. Yeah, I mean, and the thing as well is, it's a balance between, your size of your organization, the technology that you pick, and the support that you receive for it, and, also the abilities to making these things talk to each other. So the ultimate goal, which is, the question that, what makes marketing successful? Well, I suppose that, when I speak to our customers, they say, well, marketing success to me is I get more budget next year, right? What they say to me is marketing success. And, when they really define it, they say, well, it's actually, how can we demonstrate to the business that not that we've got more click-throughs, we help generate more AUM. And that is where you kind of have to bring, not only do you have to bring that marketing stack together, you've got to find a way to feed that into the sales stack, into the sales reporting, to kind of, join dots throughout the whole process. So, and that's where tech and APIs and systems, dare I say, like ours, we bring, bringing that data together, like you mentioned.
I'm obviously super conscious of the time. Very, very good question. What does headless mean? I mean, this is headless in a content management system is decoupling the front end of your website from the back end publishing core CMS. So in a WordPress environment, that means instead of WordPress managing both the front end of your website in terms of the actual pages that are seen and the back end of publishing and writing pages and posts, it decouples those. And so your users still see WordPress at the back end, but the front end could be developed in React or some other language, which means that it's separated and it talks to the back end via the API. And what that means is you can get a very, very, very fast front end because it's effectively built on something that's static. And it also has arguably in that environment even security benefits because someone can attack the front end. They can't get through to the back end. So that's headless, probably poorly explained, at least in the content management.
That's very well explained, Andrew. So, moving on to Teams, and this is not a pitch from Microsoft, by the way. Teams.
No, I spend much of my time in Teams. So yeah, let's quickly run through these. I guess the observations that we see in successful teams, and all of these are massive topics that could probably have their own sort of full day workshops on, right? But I think broadly I would say leveling up digital skills. So in our world, quite often we have channel marketers, we have kind of digital specialists, and there's just a constant need to try and say, well, how do we start to bring those sort of skill levels together, whilst also acknowledging that there are some purely specialist skills, whether it's SEO or whatever it might be, that you're going to go, well, actually, no, not everyone out, in the channel needs to understand how to do that stuff. But a general leveling up of digital skills. And secondly, starting to move away from necessarily channel specialisms to more acquisition, engagement, retention type skills. So if we look outside our industry, you're an acquisition specialist, you're a lead gen specialist, you're a conversion specialist, and you just need to learn the attributes of the channel that you've been assigned to. So if you are a lead gen specialist in the institutional channel, then you are looking at what triggers institutional investors to come on the top of the funnel. So I think a move towards so leveling up skills and a move towards more funnel stage skills rather than just going, well, I look after institutional channel all the way through. I think that's a shift that is very early days, but that's probably where we should be heading. And the other one is just slightly left field, just making sure that you've got collaboration tools internally that allow all of these different teams, so PR, sales, marketing, client services, tech, all those teams to collaborate together. Time and time again, we sort of see disparate messaging systems in place that makes it very hard to run integrated campaigns because everyone's working on different platforms. Maybe it's a larger firm's problem, but thinking about the collaboration tools that you use within the business.
Yeah, and the other skill that obviously I work on the kind of the other end of it, which is kind of the data side and marketing skills. Is if I could give every 290 persons we work with, a course on Excel and how to use VLOOKUP without sending spreadsheets to us, I would be a happy man. And there is a lot to be said in just understanding tools like Power BI, tools like Tableau, and even Excel, because there is a point where your digital marketing stops, and you're going to have to start doing cross campaign analytics, cross channel analytics, and if you don't have the budget for it, it can all pretty much be done in Excel. But I just thought I'd chuck that one in there, Andrew, just to get some personal frustration out. So moving on to the last topic, empowering the team.
Yeah, I guess again, if we're thinking about what successful firms do, they empower their marketing teams, and I mean that both at a where does marketing fit in the organization? And we think that it fits, at the board table, at the C-suite. Marketing's an important function in the business, and we see it needing to be ever more aligned with sales and, in my view, PR, so that all of those functions are working together. And I think that through the pandemic, we've seen, as I said before, marketing having its day in the sun to a certain degree, and realizing that as we couldn't have those face-to-face interactions, it became incredibly important to think about how we communicated with prospects and clients virtually. So the firms that we see doing well are the ones who do see marketing as an important part of their business. And I think that the marketing teams themselves see themselves as important and need to be around the table when plans for the year ahead are being made, product development plans are being made, distribution plans are being made, that actually marketers should be, understanding all of that, participating, contributing to that.
And ultimately marketing teams feeling valued. And that is the thing, right? So
and some of that comes back to measurement, right? It's on, it's on marketing teams to make sure that, they have set, so they understood the objectives of the firm. They are now doing some marketing that contributes to those, and then they can play back to the business and say, well, this is what we did. And everyone feels that was useful. It delivered results, conversions went through to sales, all of that kind of useful measurement stuff.
I agree. And putting that all together, and I'm just got an eye on time, is, it's a challenge. And it's almost like you can't eat an elephant. You've got to eat an elephant in small bites. It's kind of like, I'd hope from this session we've run today with you, Andrew, the participants can take one or two things away and kind of, drill down on that and kind of have some positive outcomes. So, well, thank you, everybody. I think just ending, there are some giveaways at the end. So if you'd like a free consultation with myself, or you'd like the book I wrote on the subject, ask nicely and we'll send it over. And Andrew, this is obviously a slide that shouldn't have been there, but I'll just move it away. And Andrew, this is just something on white marble and Beacon that I thought I'd throw in there.
Yeah, so look, while that's running through, Beacon's our benchmarking product, and it allows you to compare your marketing performance with firms that look like you, both here in the UK and the US. I think its whole purpose is to allow you to make better marketing decisions, so be more informed about what good looks like. So, and all I would say is, if you would like to see, as the slide says, if you'd like to book a demonstration of that, feel free to drop me a line and we'll get that set up for you.
Super. Well, I'm going to take some questions now in the last 3 or 4 minutes we have. So would any of the 80 people who have stayed on, we peaked at 121, so that's not too bad. So we've got any more questions? Have we got a question come through now? We've got quite a few, actually. How is it different from Google Studio? And would you like to take that one?
Sure, and in fact we use Google Data Studio within our product as it happens. But the point of the benchmarking is that you can do a lot of your own analytics with Data Studio, with those other visual data tools. But what you can't do is access other firms' data. So the whole premise of the benchmarking product is that we, for every member that joins, we pull in their data across website, email, social, search, site performance, collate it and play it back to you. So you are comparing your data that you may already be looking at in Google Data Studio with what other firms who look a lot like you are achieving in those channels.
Yeah, super. So we've got a few more requests. But if the people who want the demo or the book, just email me. It's on the invite that you got sent, and I'll sort that out for those people who were interested. We've got another question come through. Share a bit more on cadence and how many touch points and where and when.
Probably need a little bit more info on that question in terms of publishing cadence. Don't know. Happy to maybe I can drop you a line afterwards and do a better job of answering your question. I'm not quite sure what your question means.
Right. So I read that as kind of journey orchestration, in as much as, what, do you send people things for events? When do you send something for, white paper? How do you build that momentum up? And a lot of that is kind of done through the concept, journey orchestrations. And when people are engaging with the digital content, having automations built in place to actually trigger the next part of that journey is kind of how I would really. It's very much an Adobe kind of question.
Yeah, and I mean we've definitely built those models, and I guess without sounding too consultancy-like about it, it depends on the scenario. So are we trying to bring people into the top of the funnel? What's the messaging sort of sequence that we want to see? What's the result we want to see? But very, very happy to drop a line afterwards and talk about that.
Super. And you can answer Chris's question while you've got there, is how is the peer group created in Beacon? Is it AUM, Morningstar categories, investment strategies, etc.?
So it's UK and European firms, and then US, so two sort of overall groups, and then within those groups it's effectively almost large asset managers, sort of small to boutique asset managers, and then wealth managers. That's the broad separation. As the group gets bigger and bigger and bigger, then you can actually start to sub-segment into those more, those narrower definitions. But at the moment, it's UK and US. And what I would say on that is that a lot of the measurements, of course, are ratios. So actually, size doesn't matter so much. If you look at something simple like a conversion rate or an email open rate, it doesn't matter whether you're sending sort of arguably 10,000 or a few hundred. You're either good at getting those conversion rates or you're not. So we see a lot of comparison doesn't matter too much on size.
Okay. Right, we've got one more question from Megan. Could you share your email address? Right, I'll share my email address. I'll put it in the chat. So paul.das@profundcom.net. Paul.das profile. Yeah. So if you want to email requests, I didn't send it to. Hold on a second. Let me send it to everybody. Okay, I'm having a bad moment, everybody. So paul.das@profundcom.net. Right. Super. So everybody will get a replay as well of this. So you can pick my email up there too. So I believe if there are any more questions, 5, 4, 3. I think we're done, everybody. Andrew, thanks again for your time. Really appreciate it. I hope you found it useful, and I hope the audience found it useful as well. Thank you, everybody, for joining us.
My pleasure. Thanks, everyone.